Let's start with a basic definition of Chat GPT. Now, we're not experts on Chat GPT. This is brand new, but this is our reflections on what this means for our industry. So, Chat GPT, if you're familiar with chatbots, you're already halfway there in terms of understanding what Chat GPT is. But it stands for Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer. They need some branding help. Generative pre-trained transformer, which is almost like a sophisticated chat bot, but more. And I'm the word nerd that I am, like fixates on that word generative because it means to produce or generate as opposed to mimic. Mark, how would you define Chat GPT?
I think as you describe it, Bobby, it's like the chat that we all know and potentially loathe that we've seen on, let's say, a airline website or a bank website that where you're trying to get some, or maybe your cell phone company where you're trying to get some kind of answer from the automated chatbot. It's pretty rudimentary. Um, this is almost like a chatbot that magically works and almost like reads your mind. And I think it's the power of AI before our very eyes.
Yeah.
It's an example of bringing AI into literally the real world for regular people to understand what's happening and some of the business applications for it. It's
Yeah.
quite staggering.
Yeah. Um, I want to share what Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, who created ChatGPT, recently replied. Sorry. I want to share what Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, who created ChatGPT, recently replied to a few definitions of ChatGPT on Twitter by saying this, quote, I don't agree with it, but a calculator for words is an interesting framework for GPT. It's an interesting framing of the concept. And then he said in a few tweets later, Chat GPT is like an e-bike for the mind, which as a content creator, I thought that's a brilliant example because to me, which we'll get into, Chat GPT is not a threat, it's an opportunity. But let's get into that part of it, Mark. We sort of define Chat GPT. The best way to understand it is actually to demonstrate, which we're going to demonstrate here for you from a few examples that Mark tried on what it looks like. But we already use Chat GPT to some degree. Mark, you pointed out that another Mark Evans, a friend of yours and a fractional CMO, said that this is a whole new world, but AI has been seeping into the content world for years. So, for example, we use different tools. I use Grammarly, I use WordTune, I use Copy.ai. I'm already using sort of Chat GPT technology, the framework that has been built around this kind of technology. So it's interesting what's happening now. No, is different though. It's like reached a wider audience, and this is what's happening with technology. You've watched this for years, being the technologist, fascinated person that you are. You've seen where technology sort of enters the market and sort of has this sort of initial spark just amongst the techie people, and then all of a sudden it starts to take off, and that's what's happened here. Is that how you would reflect on it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a great point. That many of us take AI in the real world for granted. And, Copy.ai or Grammarly's huge.
Yeah.
You also think about autocomplete for people who use Gmail or other writing applications where it anticipates what it is that you're trying to say. And in a lot of cases, they get it right. And you're like, okay, I'll be able to save some time here if I just accept Google's suggestion to autocomplete. And so that's AI in action. And I think this is the next step. I think what's different about Grammarly is that it's almost like the technology is just so beautifully woven into the experience that you take it for granted. It's operating in the background. Whereas here you're typing in a prompt and it's delivering for you this, in many cases, a beautifully written and very articulate and oftentimes correct response. Now, of course, there have been many examples where ChatGPT does not get it correct, and we should point out that it's not perfect. That's for sure. But I think that's what seems to be so magical about it right now. It's almost like the early days of Google when you would type something in, and Google, in a clairvoyant way, responded with these perfect search results. But what I will say now is, after playing around with ChatGPT, it almost makes Google look ancient, like almost overnight.
Yeah.
Search results with
Right.
links to blog posts and articles
Right.
versus this um, versus what ChatGPT is able to produce. It's almost like day and night.
Yeah. Well, and what we always try to do is we're always trying to bring this big topic that's entered the market in the world and taken by storm and provide that relevance and context for our industry because that's the world
Yes.
we live in. So let's do this by way of some experiments that you ran, Mark. You ran some experiments on what would this look like for the promotional products industry as Chat GPT is right now in its current form, but also with the mind that it's going there. This is going to be iterated on so quickly, so fast that it's going to get smarter and smarter. So let's talk about your experiments you did. Then we're going to talk about the danger and the opportunity. Just so as we get into the experiments, people understand exactly what we're talking about here. Mark, you plugged in a few examples and just interject when you're ready, but I have these in front of me. You typed this into Chat GPT. This question. First one. I am the marketing manager for a beverage company. I am planning a customer meeting in Austin, Texas, and want to provide my guests with gifts that are specific to the area. My customers are executives and have fine tastes. My budget is between $50 and $100 per person. Can you give me some ideas? Chat GPT responded immediately with this. Little pause in case I had some, but in case I don't here. Sure, here are a few gift ideas that are specific to Austin, Texas, and would be suitable for executives with fine tastes. I think that's interesting. A gift basket filled with local specialties such as barbecue sauce, hot sauce, pecans, and other treats. A gift
Pretty
card to a
good.
trendy Austin restaurant or food tour. A bottle of wine or craft beer from a local winery or brewery. A piece of art or artisanal product from a local maker. A music or entertainment experience such as tickets to a local concert or show, or a book or guide about Austin's history, culture, or outdoor activities. A set of high quality Austin themed coasters or a decorative tray, a gift card to a local spa or wellness center, a membership to a local museum or cultural institution. And it closes with this. Again, the best gift will depend on your customer's interests and preferences. You may want to consider offering a few options that each customer can choose the gift that they like best. Wow.
I would do business with that promotional products distributor. And it was a computer.
Right. What were your thoughts as you plugged that in and got this response?
I was trying to break it, to be honest. I was trying to be a wise guy and say, okay, there's just no way it's
Right.
going to have this level of specificity. And and of course, it came back with what I would say beats most. I shouldn't say most, but would certainly beat a, a decent number of average promotional products distributors that whose their response might be, here's a website, or maybe a t-shirt, or maybe a hat, maybe some cowboy boots or something like that. And this was incredibly thoughtful.
Right.
It was a very diverse range of suggestions. So there were things in there that were classic promotional products. I think that they mentioned coasters. Clearly,
Yeah.
we can get that as promotional products distributors. And then there was one other, a tray, and there might have been another one that I'm just forgetting. But I loved the other experience-based gift suggestions.
Yeah.
The food tour or gift certificate or whatever. And I think that rounds it out. I mean, obviously, we would still like to get the promotional products business, but the very best promotional distributors are ones that offer the full experience and aren't necessarily just pushing a product.
Right.
Certainly, our friends Danny and Robert at Brand Fuel have been such great examples, or set such great examples around offering experiences and services and products all in the same package. So I think ChatGPT completely nailed it. Oh, sorry, it was the book. There was a recipe book, and I was thinking of our
Yeah.
good friend Ronnie Wright at the book company. So
Right.
wouldn't that be perfect? But I, I find it very, very hard to find fault in what it
Yeah.
produced. Obviously, it could be more specific. I think the next evolution of ChatGPT might be some links that say, well, here's some specific examples, and it's only a matter of time until it gets there.
Yeah. Mark, do you think I'm sort of jumping ahead to something? Do you think Chat GPT has the potential to sort of upset the traditional way we see product search in the industry? Do you think that's the most disruptive piece of the technology?
Yes, I think I think search has been a huge part of our industry for decades. You
Yeah.
think about the evolution of search. I mean, it would have been catalogs, and then we saw the rise of ESP and Sage, and they became dominant players with really effective tools, kind of in that pre-Google age. And then, of course, you saw the rise of Google, and then the rise of social media, and search is central to each of those experiences. And they've completely changed the relationship that distributors have to Sage and ESP. They're still powerful products, but they're different than they were
Hmm.
before in the world of Google and social media. And I think this is the next frontier, right? Like you're typing in, you're not really using it as a search engine. I think OpenAI, the people behind ChatGPT, are very clear that this is not a search engine, but it's clear that people are typing something in looking for an answer. So in many respects, that's kind of like a search engine.
Right.
And I think I think this is now, it has the capability of offering a more strategic solution than, say, ESP, Sage, or even Google have done, because those searches are a lot more transactional. I'm looking for a mug, I'm looking for pens, I'm looking for hats that are made in a union shop on the West Coast of the United States, that sort of
Right.
thing. Um, as you saw in this very simple example that we just read, um, it's not very transactional at all. It's offering this kind of
Yeah.
experience, and quite strategic, specific to Austin, Texas, which is this, fictitious place, not fictitious place, but just in this particular example. So
Hmm.
I think it's taking search to the next level.
Yeah.
And of course, we'll talk about whether this is harmful or helpful to our industry.
Right. It's almost as if it has opportunities on both sides. Obviously, with our product supplier search, through as we're trying to source products as distributors, but then also just from a consultative standpoint. Like one of the examples that you typed in, a very basic example, but it's kind of interesting how you said this is even taking the place of like a Google search, but on a higher level. Is that you gave this example? I work at Farrell Oil Company in OKC. I'm looking for some nice gift ideas with my logo on it for an upcoming customer event. Would my logo look better on an embroidery cap or a silkscreen t-shirt? Now that's pretty basic, but I love the fact that it has a very sophisticated answer. It's an answer everybody in this audience knows, but it went on and I won't read the whole thing, but it says the decision of whether to use embroidery or silkscreen for your company's logo on gifts will ultimately depend on a few factors, including the design of your logo. That's pretty interesting, right? Um, the type of material you're printing on, and the quantity of gifts you are ordering. Here are a few pros and cons of both embroidery and silk screening. Then it breaks it down and defines it. That was pretty sophisticated response, really, to say it'll depend on your logo, because that's what a human would say.
Yeah, and think if you're a salesperson and you're not sure of the answer and you type it in, you get that
Right.
response. It's giving you some validation. Now,
Right.
of course, as you said a little while ago, ChatGPT doesn't necessarily get it right all the time, so you need to take it with a grain of salt. Um, but I would say they get it right more often than times than they get it wrong.
Yeah.
And and I think it's just so interesting as a way to be able to equip a salesperson with this additional piece of information that helps validate and um, helps them just think in a more polished and more comprehensive way with their clients.
And the key, of course, to all of this being just the high octane speed at which it operates. That's
Yes,
what's astounding is the time
yes.
factor. So let's speak to this a little bit. What do you think the dangers of Chat GPT and the concerns are? Are there any? Or is there a disruptive threat here for our industry? Remember when Alibaba came on the scene? Both distributors and suppliers were really concerned because suppliers, you could argue that Alibaba looked like a threat to take away their international sourcing, where
Yes.
distributors could be, or end clients could be at a click of a button, they could find something. But it didn't quite happen. And Alibaba, in a sense, even though it's still one of the biggest companies, to my knowledge, of the world, it's not really been utilized like we thought it would. It just sort of dissipated. And in some ways, this similar kind of technology sits on the horizon as well. But what do you think? What's the danger or the weakness of this?
I think the danger of this, just like Alibaba, just like Amazon, just like 4imprint, just like any of these other disruptive technology companies, just like Google, we were talking about that before.
Mhm.
Remember all the people who were worried that Google was going to destroy the promotional products industry because an end client could type in,
Right.
where do I find t-shirts?
Right.
Right. That
Right.
seems quaint right now, but back in the
Right.
day, it was an
It's a real
existential
threat.
threat.
Yeah.
So I maintain, just like those other examples, that the danger is for uh, the order taking distributor,
Hmm.
the distributor that is transactional, the distributor that is a true middle person, and they're not really adding value beyond just being an order taker. We have talked about this. Many of our peers in the promotional products industry have talked about order takers in the past. Clearly, this represents an existential threat and danger to anyone who is in that space.
Yeah.
Um, I maintain there's actually not that many of those types of people in the promotional products industry now, given
Yeah.
what we've gone through, by the way, after COVID. If
Right.
you're still in the promotional products industry after COVID, you're battle
Yeah.
tested,
Yeah.
which we've talked about before.
Hmm.
But so I do think that that's a danger. I think it's an incredible enabler and opportunity for everyone else in the promotional products industry that thinks creatively and strategically. And if
Yeah.
you can involve your customers with this technology, I think um, it's a true difference maker. I think it's something that really amplifies the relationship and the experience.
Yeah.
Um, I feel the same happened when we would talk about how Amazon was going to come in and take over the promotional products industry. I remember you and I had done presentations like probably for the last 10 years. We'd be asked to speak at the expo or at ASI shows about the Amazon threat.
Hmm.
And they were always packed. The sessions are always
Right.
packed. And we were so worried about
Right.
it. And I think the view, and I think that this has become true, is that what that does is it empowers the strategic and creative distributors to do even better work. I
Hmm.
feel it's no different than what happened when the calculator was introduced in the classrooms of the world, right? And
Right.
everyone thought like, oh, would kids not know how to do math anymore, or they'd be cheating
Right.
on tests and whatever the case may be. And what would happen to times tables and all that stuff. And look at how advanced math is now because of the calculator, and the things that can be done because of the calculator, or things that can be done because of the spreadsheet that has been created. Think about how that has revolutionized certain pockets of the financial world or accounting world or the business world, and you're not having to spend time on all these low value tasks. So
Yeah.
I know I'm jumping between a bunch of different technologies, but I am incredibly optimistic that this is the kind of technology that, as it matures, it's going to be an incredible enabler for our industry. And the only people who have to be worried are those that are taking the orders and not thinking creatively or strategically with their customers.
Right.
How
I
about
saw
you, Bobby?
someone
What
on
do you think?
Twitter. I saw someone on Twitter say, if you think Chat GPT will replace you, you're right. And I thought that was a brilliant way of looking at it, right? If you think it's a threat, then it's a threat.
Yeah.
The thing that you and I have seen in our industry is Amazon is a perfect example. Is that we're often comparing a new threat on the horizon head on, as if it's us versus this new threat. And what we
Yes.
don't realize is tangentially, and this is from other distributors who have been on the SKUcast that have taught me this, is that what did that bring as a benefit? Amazon coming in and teaching folks to be more comfortable with buying online,
Yes.
to getting used to expediting orders, to minimizing the frustration of back and forth with processing. They actually did a whole lot of good to the buyer's psyche, and has a lot of potential there too. There's going to be some tangential reward that we get out of this that's not a direct threat or a direct opportunity with
Yes.
ChatGPT.
Well, and we
Um,
even talked about, sort of just to jump in, we talked
yeah.
about the world of e-commerce and how e-commerce initially was for imprint and companies like or Alibaba, the disruptors that were going to disintermediate the industry and get rid of the distributor. We have these
Hmm.
direct selling relationships. And the reality is now that e-commerce is a reality literally for every distributor in this industry, whether
Right.
it's for imprint, pure e-commerce player, and they do a great job, all
Yep.
the way down to that um, that boutique agency distributor that is high touch, strategic, creative work, a lot of in person, they're also using e-commerce, whether it's company stores or pop-up stores or whatever the case
Yeah.
may be, to amplify that relationship and offer that Amazon style buying experience for the customer. And that's amazing to me, right? Like
Yeah.
e-commerce before was like us versus them, or I go out and have lunch with my client and that's why they do business with me. I think that's the silly way of putting it. You still do that,
Yeah.
but make sure that your offering includes that e-commerce experience, because that's another dimension to your business.
Yeah.
And it's something not to displace you. It's something that augments the sales and
Yeah.
augments the
Yeah.
experience.
And to your e-commerce threat example, again, we saw e-commerce as a threat, but then what actually happened is everybody doing shops used e-commerce as a sales tool, as an opportunity. It became an actual opportunity, but it looked like a threat head on. Um,
Yes.
to me, the danger and weakness of ChatGPT, as it is in its current form, because you know it's just going to get better and better, is big content creators would possibly see this as a potential threat. But like I said, if you think it's going to replace you, it probably will. I don't think it's going to replace me. In fact, because I've already been using content tools, I'm not threatened by it. I'm sort of more like, oh, wow, this is cool. Let's see what we get to develop out of this. It's going to make my life a little bit easier. Seth's comment about content was this, that it should be useful, insightful, and urgent. And I want to add, if I can, to Seth's comment, that it also really good content, from essays to the best articles you write to even short form copy, has a perspective, a point of view, and an opinion. So one of the dangers of and weaknesses of Chat GPT right now is it's a fairly homogenized worldview. And this has been covered on other podcasts and other examples. And this is not our territory, so we don't have to go down and stay in this lane. But this to me right now looks like it's a reflection of the sum total of human experience. And so you're seeing a lot of these. There are some phenomenal, like amazing examples. Out on the Daily, they did an example of someone who the host actually said, "I'm going to ask it a very deep question about why do I get irritated with people?" And its
Yes.
response was a very sophisticated response that any high paid therapist would give. So it was
Yes.
actually a brilliant response. Um, but one of the things they ask on the Daily, and I think this is one of the dangers, is that you know these biases are kind of fed into the system, right? It
Yes.
has to be output what's fed into it, and then
Yes.
it can't answer things like Mark, you're a history major. Like take Chat GPT and ask what was the cause of the Civil War. I
Yes.
mean, being a history major, you know that there are so many different viewpoints on
Yes.
that.
Absolutely. Right.
Um,
And I think to your point, it will Chat GPT offer a balanced answer to that. Now, I haven't typed
right,
that into Chat GPT, and I think that when it comes to historical events, that obviously could be all sorts of issues there in terms of what kind of bias there is, or is it misleading you about like who won, or conspiracy theories, all that stuff.
right,
That may be a separate podcast episode that we could dive into that. As it relates to promotional products, I mean, the concept of bias with ChatGPT, it feels a little bit comical to think that there'd be bias around promotional products and whether that would have an impact. But who knows? Maybe ChatGPT would be big fans of apparel, but not maybe giving a focus to hard goods. Like
yeah,
this is a silly example, but
no,
maybe I'm trying to take what you're talking about bias and thinking about what negative impact that could have on the marketing services industry, which we're in.
right, or add a positive to it. So, speaking of bias, perspective, and opinion, the thing that Chat GPT can do right now is that it can't offer that strong opinion to you and your customers. Here, of those examples that you cited earlier that were returned to you when you talk about,
Yes.
hey, I've got this event coming up, what it can't do is say, hey, look, here's why I think this piece right here is going to be the best
Yes.
option for you. And we're going to do a
Yes.
little bit different with this. And here's what's going to be the outcome. Right now,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
it's in that phase. And so it's this perspective and point of view and opinion. And it's
Yes.
honestly the same thing we've been talking about for a long time. The strongest boutique agencies, the strongest consultative salespeople have always had, and this is your words, not mine, a very strong opinion and perspective to their clients.
Right. And I think you make a good point there. Even though I was impressed with the options it was giving, you could
I was
tell
too.
that it was hesitant, and I don't know if this is the technology that's baked into it right now, but
Right.
hesitant to have a strong opinion which way you should go. So
Right.
it feels to me where it's helpful to people in our industry and maybe even our end clients is it kind of gets them in the door, gets them in the door thinking a little bit more about what they could do and inspires them. But they still need to have their hand held when it comes to coming up with the final idea. And then obviously all of the busy work around actually implementing and executing the campaign.
Yeah. Right.
So, but I think, I mean, we've talked about this, and many in our industry have talked about this, that an inspired and educated client is the very best client to have.
Yeah.
A client that doesn't know anything, or a client that comes in and they're ignorant of all the details, or maybe they have like a certain worldview that might make them difficult to work with, is a really difficult client. And that's often where you just end up with, okay, I'll just give you the t-shirt. Whereas a client that's curious and has been inspired by some content, or which is why we're such big fans of content marketing, is a client that is more prepared to engage in a conversation with you as the distributor. And I feel that exchange on ChatGPT about that fictitious example of a marketing or beverages marketing buyer planning an event in Austin, it starts the conversation. And I think it's fascinating, right? Because then you can then there's so many different ways you could pursue that. And I think as a salesperson, that would be really, really helpful.
Yeah.
I might even get that to, if I was a salesperson as a distributor, if I was a distributor salesperson, I might even go through that exercise directly with my client. Hey, you're a beverages marketing manager that's planning this in Austin. Let's type it in together and let's see what happens.
Let's
talk
see what
about
happens.
this, right?
Yeah.
Hey, how about that cookbook? Or they may say, oh, it's missing some pieces here. Maybe that's a wonderful way to start the conversation, right? Do that together. Lean right into it. Don't run away from it.
That's a really good idea, actually. It's kind of funny because then you could take it and go, hey, you could have fun with it and say, here's what ChatGPT revealed that you guys should do. We actually added a few things to this, but here's how because we know your brand, we know your history, and because we have an opinion and we have taste, we're going to, boost it up. It's kind of fun. It's a good idea. You touched on content, and one last thing on like content and threat or opportunity. I've always said that content is deep work executed quickly. And what ChatGPT and things like Grammarly have enabled you to do is, Sam, again, the founder of OpenAI, said this. He said, aim high and do it faster. That's actually very close to the deep work executed quickly aspect of it. So when I'm doing an article or something and I run it through, Grammarly is a great example. We've all used Grammarly. You run it through Grammarly, I'll 30% of the time go, I disagree, Grammarly. I'm going to actually do it the way that I wrote it, right? Yes. Or the other thing is I submitted something earlier to one of the other ones. I forgot which one it was, but I didn't take any of their suggestions. But you know what it did? It made me think. It made me think through the process a little bit more, and it gave me an editorial tool and almost a colleague in a sense to bounce this off of. And that forced me to think through it from another angle. And so that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, and that way I think it's almost like this superpower that you're able to engage with to either help you by offering you suggestions that you may or may not even select. But I think it's forcing you to think in a different way, and I think that that's important.
Yeah.
So Bobby, what did you say because I've joked with you, and this was a bit of the precursor to this episode, where like I'll send you like a provocative joke, and I'll say, "Hey, Bobby, there's ChatGPT. We don't need you to write blog posts anymore, right?" And then it's like, ha ha ha, and of course we both know it's total nonsense. But what's your response to that? Because there are different levels. Well, so here's maybe a follow-up question. Sorry for the double on question here. I think that there are a lot of blogs and content writers that are out there that are churning out content for the purposes of SEO, clickbait, very basic blogs. I'm going to say that what you produce at COMMONSKU, Bobby, is the exact opposite of that. It is multi-layered, it's complex. There's lots to it. But as I say, there's a lot of content that's out there that's quite transactional, is being written by people that aren't really spending the same amount of time on it. Is that the kind of content that's going to be replaced? Like, what do you think?
I love this question because I've thought of this exercise. You could take all the articles we've ever written, you could take the transcripts from everything we've ever done, and you could feed it into, say, a chat GPT type tool. and come out. And honestly, you realize the industry struggles with a lot of the same problems over and over in different ways. We struggle with scaling. We struggle with uh, sales. We struggle with business development. So there are some common problems. You could take every article we've ever written, feed it in a system and say, okay, every 2 weeks, I want you to spit me out an article on these 3 or 4 different topics. And it could happen.
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
you could probably put that on autopilot and it would work for your SEO to some degree. Here's the difference is that right now, as we look at the precipice of 2022 to 2023, that we are dealing with sort of multiple threats and multiple opportunities. And so we have different options ahead of us. What it can't do at this moment is foresee what people are struggling with in the next 3 to 6 months. The other thing it can't do, which is what we will be doing, is taking stories from entrepreneurs like that are literally in the moment and returning those and weaving those into the content. So for example, let's take the topic of scaling. Scaling is a big topic for everyone in the industry right now. It's probably the hottest topic. We'll be weaving that into our content as we go forward. How did this entrepreneur grow from 0 to 5 million? How did this entrepreneur grow from 5 to 10 million, 10 to 15 million? You could feed some of that back into the system and get that from ChatGPT. You get some basic answers. What you couldn't get is the texture and the tone and the story of that individual's experience. So that's the thing that sort of concerned me a little bit is ChatGPT can return a homogenized, very intelligent result that's somewhat homogenized. But I want to know what Susan's experience was, not what the homogenized viewpoint of a particular conglomerate looked like.
I think the key word there is viewpoint. And there are two types of viewpoints in this world. There's homogenized viewpoints, as you just said, and there's specific viewpoints to a specific person or company. And I think in a services-based business like the promotional products industry, as a distributor going out selling your services to customers, the very best distributors, the most enduring, most successful distributors in our industry are the ones who get paid for their opinions about their clients' businesses. And full stop. Like that's where it's at. That's why you work with any number of incredible distributor firms that are in our industry. It's because they've got a strong, creative, unique viewpoint and opinion about their end client's business. And they can execute and put together promotional products in a campaign to deliver on that particular client's marketing objective. If that viewpoint and opinion is homogenized, that's the same thing as throwing a catalog from PCNA or from Sanmar or any of these great suppliers. That's homogenized and can be produced by anyone. So I'm not saying anything particularly original there. We all know this, but I think the key here is how can you use the power of a homogenous viewpoint to then build your own unique viewpoint. And I think that's what we're talking about. ChatGPT, no one will ignore it. It's like, how can it raise you up to here?
Yes.
And then on top of that, you're adding the whipped cream, which is your own thing. And that's where the margin is. That's where the loyalty is. That's what the very best end clients want to pay you for. Otherwise, they could just fire up ChatGPT and put the suggestions into 4imprint and boom, there you go. And you know what? There'll be a lot of end clients that will do that. And those are probably not the ones that are the right fit for your more creative and strategically oriented distributorship.
Yep. We'll end on that because I think that's a great way to end on this. And I'll add that I, again, see ChatGPT as an opportunity, just like we have with Grammarly and all the other tools. I'm fascinated by how, as a content creator, I can use this. As Sam said, the founder, aim high and do it faster. And I think that's a brilliant way to look at this, is an actual tool in your toolbox. So, all right. Thanks, my friend. Until next time.
Thank you. That was fun. Thanks, man.